We are back for the second session. This session is a little bit different. We have two speakers, and they were also organizers for this FDP. Uh, One is Dr. Shaisha, and the other one is Manjushri. I'll just read a brief bio sketch of them. Dr. Shaisha Vinjamuri has a doctoral degree in pharmaceutical biotechnology from Andhra University. She has received the Professor Desharaju Venkatarao Shaistapurthi Endowment Prize Gold Medal for the best thesis entitled Bioproduction and Purification of the Medicinally Important Enzyme urocanase from a novel kidney cell line, Andhra University. She has also worked as a postdoctoral fellow at UC Berkeley, USA. She is a mentor and judge for biomolecular design competition held by Wyss Institute, Harvard, USA. She is currently working as a faculty in biotechnology department at BMSC and is actively involved in developing bioinks for use in 3D printing. The other speaker is Manjushri, who is a QA/RA engineer. She obtained her MTech degree in Biomedical Signal Processing and Instrumentation from BMS College of Engineering, Bengaluru. She is passionate for medical device development and currently working as Quality Assurance and Regulatory Affairs Engineer for medical devices focused in design controls. She also worked with biomedical core companies as application specialist in Philips India Limited and product development intern (MRI) in Siemens Healthineers. She has won the runner-up award in WIE International Humanitarian Technology Project Competition organized by IEEE Bangladesh section held in Dhaka. She takes a multidisciplinary approach that encompasses the field of biomaterials, biosignal processing, medical imaging, and instrumentation. She is a member of Manipal Government of Karnataka Bio-Incubator and member of International Association of Educators and Researchers (IAER) London. With her good analytical and problem-solving skills, she is always eager to take up the challenges. Welcome you both, and over to Shaisha.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I hope the screen is visible for all. It's a challenge being one of the coordinators and also giving a lecture on the current topics of 3D printing. Uh, the topic that we will be talking about today is slightly different from all the topics that you have heard so far. This is a niche area where the application of 3D printing into biology is taking more precedence compared to the basic designing of 3D printing as such. So I'll be talking about bioprinting. The bioprinting basically is how we can make machines which can make us in turn. As aptly said, machines we build are building us. So the outline for today's lecture would be like this. I'll go about telling what is bioprinting, why bioprinting, what are the applications of bioprinting, how is it different from the conventional 3D printing, what are the processes involved in bioprinting. I'll just give an overview of this and then talk about bioinks and how you can make bioinks, followed by again an overview of the printing techniques that can be used, and conclude talking with respect to the ethical, legal, and social aspects involved. So coming to what
Ma'am,
is
sorry to
bioprinting?
interrupt you. Your screen is not visible. It's only showing the half.
It's not visible. Just give me a moment, ma. No, it is full, right?
No, yeah, now it's fine. Yeah, ma'am.
Okay. Is it clear now?
Yes, ma'am, it's fine now.
It's fine. Okay. All right. Yeah. Right. So coming to what is bioprinting. Bioprinting is the printing of cells to create tissue-like structures. The objective behind is to develop structures which can mimic natural tissue organization. The idea behind being that if you can develop a tissue artificially, then its application for mankind is immense. So in order to do so, the materials that are used are what are called as bioinks, and these are used to build up the structures layer by layer. The bioinks are materials which are basically consisting of hydrogels or other polymers along with cells. We will talk about in detail about the bioinks, the components of bioinks at a later stage. But it's important to remember that these bioinks which are used are either bioactive or bioresorbable, and the bioinks contain live cells along with other polymers. When we say that this is something which is containing live cells, then their application to mankind and health is immense. One major application of bioprinting is in the drug screening. Typically, if a drug has to be commercialized, if it has to come into the market, it takes a considerable amount of time and testing, which involves a number of clinical trials and also requires the patients having that particular conditions per se. Whereas if we have a bioprinted organoid, for example, then the time period for the testing of the drug and its acceptability to be marketed becomes considerably less. So that is one of the major area of 3D bioprinting that is currently happening all over the world. You have companies like L'Oreal, AstraZeneca, Sanofi, and Roche who built up on 3D organoids. The 3D organoids are stem cell derived and self-organized cultures which mimic the organ physiology, the cell type composition, and to a certain extent functionality. So as you can see in the figure, from the by bioprinting, sorry, you can develop different cult organoids. It could be a gut organoid to study what would be happening in the gut, how is the drug reacting, is it suitable for different conditions, and so on. Similarly, for mammary glands or for tongue or for lung, any organoid can be created. And that is one of the major applications of bioprinting, which is currently happening. The other application of bioprinting is for regenerative medicine. Now, this is still in its infancy. It is the idea behind is to develop tissues which could be integrated into the humans so that they can remove the diseased tissue or the organ. Research related to that is what is shown over here, which is called as a lung on a chip. These are typically called as organs on chips, and what you have is a 3D bioprinted lung which is functional. The remaining part remains to see how it can be integrated.
The other aspect of bioprinting involves its application in tissue engineering, in transplantation, and cancer research. Since most of the faculties are from a non-bio background, I will not be going into the depth of what is tissue engineering and cancer research or transplantation per se, but just to give you a brief idea, it is engineering tissues and organs so that it can be incorporated into a patient. And the requirement is that once it is introduced into the patient, it has to merge with the natural ecosystem in the or the tissue ecosystem and behave in a similar function as that of the native tissue. So when we look about as to how is it different from conventional 3D printing, the first basic difference is that we use living cells, right? So instead of a resin or a thermoplastic, here living cells are used. And since living cells are used, it has to be carried out under sterile, aseptic environment, and it also has to facilitate the cell growth and division. So implies that the printing has to be with very high fidelity, as well as it should have high flexibility. This is important because there has to be a diffusion of the cells, the metabolites, the nutrients, and that is what helps in the building up of a tissue. The bio ink is responsible or has to conduct the cells across the bioprinting nozzle, ensuring that there is a minimal damage to the cells. It also needs to provide nutrients, adherents, so that the cells can attach, grow, and proliferate. Also, it has to be flexible to facilitate proper proliferation. Now, it is known that as cells grow and proliferate, they adapt and modify the surrounding environment, right? So they metabolize, they release out certain products, and they take in certain products from their neighboring environment or the surroundings. So the bio ink has to have this capability of providing this environment that is required for the cell growth and differentiation. Coming to the process of bioprinting, the process of bioprinting can be broadly classified into 3 stages. One, which is called as pre-bioprinting, the bioprinting, the actual stage, and the post-bioprinting. The pre-bioprinting involves creating a digital model which the printer will reproduce. So the technologies that are used in this is typically a CT scan or an MRI imaging. Bioprinting is the actual printing process where the bioink is placed and deposition takes place layer by layer. Post-bioprinting is wherein we bring about the mechanical and chemical stimulation of the printed parts so as to get a stable functional structure. The process can be further elaborated into 5 steps as detailed over here. The first, and this is irrespective of whether you would be using an extrusion or an inkjet or a laser technology for printing. The process more or less remains the same. The first one would be to take a 3D scanning or a 3D imaging, so as to get the exact dimensions of the tissue, which is typically done by both CT scan and an MRI scanning. It is important to know the dimensions of the tissues because over here, once it is printed, further modifications may not be possible.
Once the 3D imaging is carried out, then the next step involves the 3D modeling, where a blueprint is generated using AutoCAD. And this also includes all the instructions of how the layers should be printed in detail. The third and the most important stage of bioprinting is the bioink synthesis. Bioink, as I have told earlier, is a combination of living cells and a biopolymer which is compatible and acts as a supporting matrix. Different biopolymers like collagen, gelatin, fibrin silk, alginate, etc. can be used. The use of the biopolymer is so that it provides a scaffold and nutrients for the cells to grow. Once the bioink is prepared, then it is 3D printed, which involves the deposition of the bioink layer by layer under suitable environmental conditions, which is dependent on the application. Typically, the layer thickness is less than 0.5 mm, and this mixture or the bioink, being viscous, comes out as in the viscous nature and needs to be solidified on exposure. The next step involves the solidification, and this solidification helps to give shape to the structure. This process is often called as cross-linking, and it is facilitated by UV light and also using specific chemicals or heat. But the most common use involves using UV, the most common cross-linking method involves using UV light. Finally, you have a tissue or an organ which is ready and which is then grown in a bioreactor so as to increase the cell growth and develop further. So this is a short or overview of the process of bioprinting, and as we can see, the major component of bioprinting involves the bioinks. So let us see a little bit more about bioinks. What are bioinks? Bioinks are hydrogels which can hold live cells. They consist of the live cells and a supporting scaffold material. The scaffold material or the biopolymer helps to give mechanical stability. It's important to remember that these are gels and are not filamentous in nature. The material that is being produced in the bioink typically has an additional carrier material also, that is the purpose of which is to ensure better functionality, and therefore this is it can be said to be a composite. The scaffold material, that's the biopolymer, and the additional components like the growth factors or the hormones which are required so as to help the cells grow. So the whole set, that is the live cells, the polymers, that is the scaffold material, and the additional components together is what is a bioink. It is important that the hydrophilic nature is maintained, and the hydrophilic nature is typically obtained by a combination of one or more biopolymers. This is because the hydration is required to maintain mechanical stability of the engineered tissue, and in turn affects the 3D fidelity of the object being printed. As we know, one of the key properties of any gel is their ability to shift from liquid-like to solid-like states, depending on the conditions provided. And this sol-gel transitions dictate how the bioprinting technique can be used, They also are dependent on the application of the bioink. So more in detail with respect to the requirements of a bioink, there are two parameters which have to be considered during the selection of the bioink, and that involves the physicochemical and the physiological parameters. So coming to the parameters that are required, the first one would of course be printability. The printability of the 3D construct using bioink is based on the viscosity and the rheological properties of the bioink. The bioink has to extrude out smoothly and undergo a rapid gelation immediately after printing. And therefore, the selection of the bioink is one of the type of bioink rather, or the type of biopolymer is critical. The other parameters include shape fidelity, mechanical stability. The mechanical stability typically is increased by using a good hygroscopic or hydrophilic material, as well as by polymer cross-linking. Again, the ratio of polymer cross-linking determines the mechanical stability versus the functionality, implying to say that it should not be very rigid. At the same time, it should not be extremely flexible also. The other parameters are the biodegradability, the diffusibility, and the cytocompatibility. That is, how is it reacting with the cells? Is it compatible? Is it bringing about a negative reactions in the cells, adverse reactions? Or is it compatible? Is it facilitating the neighboring cells to grow along with it? And finally, the cell viability, the migration, proliferation, differentiation, and tissue formation of the cells which are incorporated along the other biopolymer that is in the bioink. So we have a number of biopolymers that can be used as bioinks. As you can see over here, you have an extensive list. This is just a few of the most commonly used bioinks which I have included in over here. Any biopolymer typically can be used as a bioink, provided it satisfies the basic conditions of biodegradability. It should not bring about any cross-reactivity or inflammation once introduced into the body, and it should facilitate cell attachment and growth of the cells that are introduced along with this biopolymer, and bring about the cell viability. Cell viability is the growth. To name a few, if you see agarose, agarose is a common polysaccharide which is used. The agarose has a disadvantage in the sense that it cannot provide anchorage, or it cannot provide support for cell attachment, but it is highly biocompatible and has got good gelation properties. So most often it is used in combination with other biopolymers. And another example which I'm taking in is the alginate. Now, alginate has a good entrapment. It is capable of entrapping water and nutrients from the surrounding media. And since this is what is required for the cell's growth, the food for the cell's growth, it is an ideal biopolymer. But then the limitation is that it is not highly diffusible. There is a limit with respect to the diffusion of the nutrients, and it is a dense structure. So again, it has to be used in combination so that you get good entrapment as well as good diffusibility. The other biopolymer which is most often used is collagen. Collagen has got a stiff fibrous molecular structure. And in fact, this is something which is found in our muscles and tendons. right? The advantage of collagen is that it's got good viscoelastic properties. So it is responsible for the mechanical stability and also helps in adherence. The most of the bioprinting which was involved with respect to the bone bioprinting was by taking collagen as the bioink, and in combination with another biopolymer, that is hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid is extremely hydrophilic and helps in the sticking or adherence, and also the presence of hyaluronic acid facilitates or increases the cell attachment. But the disadvantage over here is that hyaluronic acid does not have an ideal consistency. So that is why it is used in combination with collagen, and that has there are research where you have the printing of the bone materials using these two biopolymers. Typically, the cells that are used are the stem cells. Stem cells are undifferentiated in nature, and they have the ability to form any different tissue or organ of the body if suitable conditions are provided. That is depending on the suitable environment, whether the particular hormones or growth factors and other components are provided, they can differentiate to any tissue inside the body. So for the current research basically involves the use of stem cells in combination with these biopolymers. The most common bioink that is used is the decellularized ECM. Decellularized ECM stands for extracellular matrix. And this is something which is found in all native tissues. So the native tissues are held onto a substrate, and the substrate is a matrix, which is what is called as the extracellular matrix. The decellular ECM can be obtained by the removal of the cells of the live tissues, right? So from a tissue or an organ, by removing out the cells, you get the decellularized ECM. And this removal process involves mild detergent treatments. The advantage of using decellularized ECM is that it has got all the physiological cues, all the required components which can mimic the native microenvironment, and therefore is highly appropriate for refunctionalization and better recovery of the tissue to get a good reproducible model. So for example, if you want to build up a heart by 3D printing, then it is advisable to take the decellularized ECM of the heart. So here, I'm not sure how much you would be following the slide because it's totally biology part, but anyway, I'll try my best to make it as simple. What you see over here is the slides of the decellularized matrix. So we have taken, let me get back to this. We've taken a heart tissue, and then this heart tissue has been decellularized. So, and after the decellularization process, if you take a slide and stain it, so you can find it appears like this. So these are still the cells which are staining dark. Over a period of time, over the period of treatment, they form filamentous structures and slowly disintegrate. So once this integrates, what you get is something which is shown in the fourth picture. And this is what is just the extracellular matrix without any cells. So the extent of how cells can be removed depends upon your treatment process. So I'll just give you an overview of the treatment process. So for the preparation of the decellularized ECM, the treatment is very simple. It involves using detergents and washing with buffers. The time period for washing depends on the tissue of your selection. The detergents most commonly used are SDS, that is sodium dodecyl sulfate. It is an anionic detergent. And we also use Triton X 100. It's a lipophilic detergent. So in the first step, you take your organ, perfuse it out so that the organ that has been taken over here is a heart. So what is done is the heart, as it is taken in, it's a goat heart that has been taken in, and we ensure that the time it is not preserved for long. It is immediately put into SDS at 1%, and while putting it in SDS, you perfuse out the blood, you remove out all the blood. This process is what is called as perfusion, and it depends on whether you want blood inside with your, along with your for your decellularization or not, the blood components or not. So in this one, we had removed out the blood, we perfused out all the blood, and then stock it in SDS. Once the blood has been removed out, cut the tissue simply by, you have a small mincer. So you can cut it into small pieces. That is what we are showing in the second figure. And then leave it for treatment. So what happens is that you get the tissue starts disintegrating and you get a minced solution. Right? So here you will basically, after the treatment with Triton X, the Triton X is another detergent that is used. Typically, it is better, especially when you have a lot of fat component in the cells. So since it's a heart tissue, the heart muscle cells would have high deposition of adipose also, that's adipose tissue or the fat tissue. And so we had used the Triton X treatment. The next step is a continuous washing and detergent treatment. So I have not shown you all the steps over here. This is a reiterative process till the tissue minces out and becomes clear, like something which is shown in the third figure over here. And then you lyophilize. Once dried, and you get typically a powder. So this one has not been still powdered into the powdered form. It's very fragile, and it's when you want to check its compatibility as a bio ink, it is just required to check whether the structure is intact of the ECM. So that's why it is once at this stage, it goes for testing for compatibility and then converted into a powder form for reuse. So this is how one of the bioinks, that is decellularized ECM, can be prepared. As you can see, the ease of preparation is what is also one of the reasons why decellularized ECM is used as a bioink in a number of for bioprinting of a number of organoids, typically which are used for drug testing. So coming to the methods of bioprinting that can be used, there are different bioprinting methods that can be used, that would be either inkjet based, extrusion based, or laser based. And these are defined, the selection of which method to use is defined based on their mechanism of material deposition, the viscosity range of the printable materials, and the morphology of the printed volume. That is whether it would be a fiber or a droplet. Typically, inkjet-based bioprinting and laser-based bioprinting give rise to droplets, whereas extrusion-based gives rise to fibers. And currently, the common method that is used is by using extrusion-based systems. While printing or using these bioprinters, there are certain bottlenecks which is faced, and each adaptability depends on the application and the type that is involved. So coming to majorly the major concern that is involved is that the gel, that is the bio ink, has to go through some kind of a phase transitions, which will enable their proper distribution. So that means that the polymers should be able to form a gel of sturdy consistency, and this helps in giving a high printing fidelity. However, the polymers cannot form tight and stiff network because this leads to cell death. So therefore, they also have to be flexible, and the flexibility should be such that there is a good diffusion of the nutrients and the movement of cells. So in order to do this, one needs to control either their chemical or physical factors, which will help in this sol gel transitions. Also, this should occur while ensuring that the cells are alive during the entire printing process as well as after printing. So therefore, the major problem is to maintain a balance of all these factors, which becomes very difficult, and that is one of the hindrance for the development of 3D bioprinting at a faster rate. I'll just give a few methods on how we can bring about the sol gel transitions. Typically, one method that is commonly used even in 3D printing is with respect to temperature, right? However, this temperature changes might result in cell injury or death. It could sometimes also lead to bleeding during printing. So it is not typically advisable to go in for temperature as a mode of control for sol gel transitions. The other forms of sol gel transition which are typically used are what are called as shear thinning and shear printing. One example of shear thinning is, for example, if you take yogurt and continuously keep mixing it, you can observe that after some time, it will be of uniform consistency and highly fluidic. So the biopolymers can also be treated to this kind of a mechanism, and that is what is called as shear thinning. So typically what is done is that the biopolymer with the cells, that is the bio ink, when they are passed in through a narrow nozzle, because of the pressure that is developed in the bio ink reservoir, this shear brings about the transition to a fluidic state. So this increases the fluidity, and therefore the gel can be printed. Once the bio ink enters the print bed or it is exposed out, the shear stress is very less or insignificant, and this facilitates the rapid gelation. This process of using shear thinning is what results in the shear printing. The requirement that you take over here is that the cell health is maintained, or it is it is checked that the cell health is, or cell injury does not occur. So the extent of shear controls the cell health, and also the viscoelastic properties of the gel should be considered. So you can see that the biopolymers that are used typically act as dampeners and thereby protect or give a suitable casing for the cells so as to reduce cell injury and facilitate their growth. The whole bio ink would function only if the cells are live. So to conclude, the nature of application determines the selection of the bio ink, which in turn is dependent on, which determines the type of bioprinter that can be used. So this slide you can see a structure of a 3D printed blood vessel. So that is, it is after taking a suitable bio ink, they have incorporated cells which will differentiate into the blood cells, and they have bioprinted the part and incubated this 3D printed material into a suitable bioreactor. So the cells are alive, they grow and reproduce and elongate, and that results in the tissue formation. So this is how you get the tissues. You can see the polymer matrix, which is shown in blue, right? And the red color is the cells which are developed. So one more characteristic, therefore, of all bioinks is that they should slowly become bioresorbable. They have to be bioactive and bioresorbable. Bioactive means that they should help the cells which are seeded with them to grow, different and differentiate. And once these cells are growing and differentiating, they should give these new cells space to divide. So that is possible by slowly degrading themselves. So that is called as bioresorption or biodegradability. So this is in brief about bioprinting. Bioprinting is still in its infancy. The work is being done with respect to drug testing, which is limited to a few companies that are using it for printing of organoids. So coming to the ethical and the legal and the social aspects, there are no clear guidelines because bioprinting is something which is very recent. There are no clear guidelines with respect to bioprinting, but the guidelines that are applicable is what they call it as the NEST ethics. The NEST ethics is basically considers issues related to clinical translations regarding the ownership of the printed organ. Who is the owner? Is the company who is printing the owner? Is the person who has donated the cells the owner? And also, what is the use of stem cells? What type of a stem cell would you use? What would be the source of the stem cells? Who would be donating the stem cells, and so on? I'm not going in detail to this because that's a totally vast area which of a different context. So the other legal issues that are involved for 3D printing include patenting and related regulatory policies, the government interventions, the classifications. What about the patent related, the IP related problems? Because you have a number of potential IPs that can be generated during bioprinting, starting from the material that you use for bioprinting to the combination that you use, the process that is involved in bioprinting. All these are parameters which can be tweaked and therefore have a potential for IP. So there are a number of legal policies or policy issues rather. And then you also have issues with respect to the type of bioreactors that can be used, their applications. The other aspect of this bioprinting involves the societal needs, the soft impacts, and the cultural and religious perspectives that might be involved or that might affect this thing. So thank you, and I'd be glad to take in any questions, if any. I'll close this. So can you?
Yeah, if there are any questions, there is disturbance in audio, it seems. If there are no more questions, we can proceed with the next speaker. Ma'am, please send me the presentation. Yes, ma'am, we will send the presentation. Okay, over to you, Manjushri.
Ma'am, you come out from the presentation mode so that I can present mine.
Okay. Is it fine now?
Yeah, ma'am. Is it visible now?
It's visible now. Manjushri, just a second, ma.
Okay.
Prakash sir, we will take the questions after she finishes the presentation. Yeah, you can start, ma.
Yeah, at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of BMSE for giving me an opportunity to talk on 3D printing in medicine regulatory approach. Since yesterday, we have already seen the case examples that been given by Dr. Ravi Kumar from NIT Warangal. Pretty much my mind was same, but then now I am focusing straight away in a regulatory approach. So the presentation outline for my talk would be Introduction to 3D Printing in Medicine, 3D Printing, a shedding light into the surgical education, manufacturing requirements for the medical industry, how 3D printing has changed the game in the medical field, 3D printed medical devices, a tough trial for regulation, quality assurance in medical 3D printing, and further challenges to continued regulation of 3D printed medical devices. So I think like most of us know that yesterday we have seen almost by now everyone would be knowing what exactly is 3D printing in medicine. So coming to 3D printing, three-dimensional printing technologies have been rapidly evolving over the past few decades and now include capabilities such as robocasting and inkjet printing that the three-dimensional interview as a diverse palette of materials beyond the hard plastics. So such as the 3D printed conductors, semiconductors, and the biomaterials. So when looking ahead in this scenario, the 3D printing could enable soft compliant biomedical devices and sensors to be fabricated on the skin inside the body and advancing portable patient monitoring, wound treatment, and organ function augmentations. So, as an example, a spatiotemporal measurements of lung deformation under mechanical ventilation can provide the valuable information for the studies that being carried out by the surgeons in terms of respiration mechanics, diagnosis of chronic lung diseases, and the therapies for the lung cancer. So, this is one of the example where 3D printing can be used. So other aspect of that would be like it improves the daily work for all the professionals from medical sector, allowing them to save money and more lives every day. So basically, it's from the creation of medical tools to the equipment to the custom-made processes. And the next one would be how 3D printing is shedding light into the surgical education. As I told earlier in the introduction that how these surgical models are helping the medical students and the surgeons to plan the surgery in a proper mode. So you, as seen in the diagram, we can see it helps in the anatomy teaching, where one of the example that 3D printing has been used is that Lady Hardinge Medical College in Delhi, they are right now using the 3D printed models to show the anatomy of a human body. So one such example is there in India itself. And pretty much more or less in abroad, most of the universities are using 3D printed models for anatomy teaching. And the next would be interpretation of imaging studies. As I mentioned, for CT, through the CT imaging and MRI imaging, we take the DICOM images and then convert into the STL format in order to have the proper surgical planning. And then patient education. Suppose for an example, if a person has met with an accident and has gone and like is any deterioration in the lower jaw, or if there is any deformities in the skull, so surgeons will plan accordingly and will show like if it with a small model that is being 3D printed, and we can show if this been replaced in your particular part, this is how you will look post the surgery. So that's how they are using for the patient education and the ex vivo practice of the surgical procedures. Like we will not be having the availability of the scavengers for the study purpose. So now they are into the ex vivo practice of the surgical procedures to see what exactly the mechanism and the physiology of the human body. So these three-dimensional printing machines have emerged as an additive manufacturing technology that is improving and leading into the realistic models with accurate characteristics close to the real life tissues. As in when I told, that is why they are even now being used in the ex vivo practice of surgical models. So for this reason, the 3D printing technology is gaining the increasing attention from many institutions, such as educational tool for the whole wide spectrum of surgical training. And then, but this is just one of the major applications of 3D printing manufacturing in medicine. So additionally used in the pre-operative planning on the complicated cases, in helping patients understand the geometry of their problems, even for dealing with the empty spaces left after the transplantation or the amputation procedures. So this particular 3D technology has been used in various surgical specialties such as cardiovascular surgery, neurosurgery, and ENT surgery to create high fidelity models for the surgical training. So the extent of the publications has led to the need of more systematic classification as well as the critical review of the data acquired regarding the 3D printed technology. So before reporting such applications of rapid prototyping for training purposes, it is prudent to lay out the overview of the consecutive manufacturing steps for these procedures. Like the steps might include data preparation, selection of printing materials, and what technology according to the final purpose are some of the key elements in the surgical education. And this 3D printing has proven its value as an additional education method in several surgical disciplines. So, better anatomy understanding of different pathologies and the enhancement of anatomical orientation among neighbor regions by novice surgeons. But also, the repeatedly of these particular techniques, which leads to the gaining of knowledge, dexterity, and the experience before the operating theater to the real patients. So one of the universities are now planning to go with these 3D pre-operative planning and then goes to the real patients. So these 3D plannings are used for the third year or the fourth year medical students before they go for the major applications of 3D. And the manufacturing requirement for medical industry. There are several reasons why additive manufacturing works perfectly for medical applications. So an on-demand 3D printing service can be used quickly to manufacture medical device for the patients in need. So these are the considerations, that is like complexity, customization, sterilization, speed, and cost. Now coming to the complexity. The surgical implant that requires complex and organic structures to be accepted by the host tissue. And these structures are prohibitively expensive with traditional manufacturing methods, but a 3D printer can create them with additional no cost. So this is one of the major requirement that for the manufacturing industry. And the second is the customization, which is born with the help of 3D printing. So 3D printed parts can be shaped to fit perfectly with patient's anatomy. Dental implants, cosmetic prosthetics, and even scale models can be created for the exact specifications of the patient. And then coming to sterilization. Medical devices must be made from the sterilizable materials only. So the most of the materials used for FDM printing or 3D metal printing can be sterilized by the steam, autoclave, or gamma radiation. As even yesterday we saw in the case studies like metal 3D printing, you might have come across this skull example. So where sterilization plays a major role when we are implanting the same model into the patient. And then the fourth one would be the speed. Medical procedures seldom happen on the relaxed schedule, but on-demand 3D manufacturing lets hospitals source necessary parts that can be completed with an acceptable short load time. And then coming to the cost, the flexible nature of additive manufacturing has greatly reduced the cost of custom devices. And hence, individualized prosthetics and implants have now become the reality for patients across the world. So these are the requirements for manufacturing. And now coming to how 3D printing has changed the game in the medical field. So as seen in the statistics given by Health Tech Zone, roughly 13% of 3D printing revenues come from the medical industry. So from prosthetics to the surgical guides, there are surprisingly number of medical applications for additive manufacturing technology. So the flexibility offered by 3D printing service lets all the medical professionals create this patient-specific devices at an affordable cost. So we can tell that the medical industry is already primed for the additive manufacturing. So one example is that how the cost savings is being done. So saving time and money are essential goals in any field, and then in medical field it with as no exception. So the 3D printed materials in future will not only provide patients with cost effective organs, implants and medical device, but also it will provide the doctors with new ways to test and train the medical students in developing practices in research. So one example here they have quoted is that a typical kidney transplant can cost more than 3 lakh dollars, where 3D printing has the potential to reduce the number to the less than 1 lakh dollars. And hence how the 3D printing industry has grown more than 35% since 2014. And the next criteria would be organs and implants, where there is certainly still process to be made, as mentioned by Shaisha ma'am. The researchers are coming closer every day with a new reality in which replacement organs for in the need of donations can be 3D printed. So due to this global shortage, many people can on be waiting list for many years. So since this idea was originally introduced, scientists have worked to develop functional designs for 3D printed hearts, kidneys, lungs, and more. So almost 1,14,000 people in US are on the waiting list for the life-saving organ donation. And the idea to print new organs was first introduced in 2003 by Thomas Boland of Selman University. And now coming to the prosthetics and medical devices. The flexibility of 3D printing allows manufacturers to easily modify the designs to specifically match the patient's anatomy. In case of prosthetics, the 3D printing procedures perfectly fitted devices quickly while remaining both functional and cost effective. The 3D printing process can be useful in producing medical devices and drugs. So one example for this I could give is the IIT Bombay has come up with a prosthetic legs with the collaboration of Jaipur Legs. I think everybody would be aware of Jaipur Legs, and now they have collaborated and have come up with a much lower cost, and wherein the other country people are also coming to India to get these prosthetics legs fixed to their legs. So there are nearly 2 million people in the United States with these amputations. The first use of 3D printed prosthetics was seen in 2012. Now coming to the surgical instruments. Using 3D printing to produce surgical instruments is an accurate and cost-effective way to quickly manufacture highly demanded medical supplies. It is easy to modify designs for particular surgical needs, even for the complex instruments. So the average price of a set of surgical instruments is more than $3,000. So a multi-hospital organization can have more than 25,000 pieces of equipment. As in when it is like more the complex in the hospital, we'll have to have more number of surgical equipments. And now coming to the main part, the 3D printed medical devices are tough trial for the regulation. As in when everybody knows that 3D printed devices could be printed on any possible location. So how will this FDA know that where the devices have been printed, whether they have been included the good manufacturing process, whether it is in compliance with the stated standards? So all these will include. So here we'll see like as in when if printing from any location, it would be definitely impossible for FDA to regulate your medical device. So let's see what is next in this. So FDA has two major classes of 3D printed medical devices. The regular classifications of medical devices class 1, 2, and 3. I'm particularly talking for the two major classes of 3D printed medical devices. The first group includes the product that can be created using any manufacturing process that includes 3D printing. So to get these products in this class approach, manufacturers only have to provide that the final medical device product is substantially equivalent to the product that is already being on market. So when it is substantially equivalent, for example, if GE has manufactured the same specifications and Philips also has come up with the same specification, either GE can use Philips device as a predicate or vice versa. So having a predicate device would will definitely lead to a faster approval from the FDA in order to get your device into the market. So the second class would be it covers devices that are deemed to be higher risk and must go through the pre-market approval process, as there is nothing similar on the market. So when coming to the higher risk, all these devices will be certainly placed under class 3. So when coming to the class 3 pre-market approval, you will have to provide many clinical evidences like you have to be in compliance with ISO 14155, stating that you have inculcated the good manufacturing practices. And coming to the risk management, you have to state that you have followed ISO 14971 standard. And coming to the quality management system, you have to follow the ISO 13485, that is quality management system for medical devices. So all these will come into picture when you are going through the pre-market approval, when you don't have any similar device in the market. But for 510K, you would not require much of clinical evidences, but then having the clinical evidences of the predicate device will lead you to the faster approval from FDA. And then now seeing the regulatory landscape for 3D printed medical devices. As shown in figure, we can see that around 75% of cleared medical devices are orthopedic, falls under orthopedics, and then 30% falls under the surgical implants, 6% for dental, and other devices which falls under the 6%. So these are the distributions of 510K cleared medical devices using 3D printing by discipline. So this 510K will also call as pre-market notification, where we have three types of 510K: special 510K, abbreviated 510K, and the traditional 510K. So more or less, if you have the entire information with all the predicates, you can definitely go claim the traditional 510K. If you don't have pretty much information of your predicate, but still you know that your device will fall under a class 2, you can go through the special 510K submissions. And you can also go through this particular paper, that is FDA and 3D printing, that is additively manufactured medical products in the FDA perspective. The CDRH is the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. This is the main sub-branch under the FDA for the regulation of the medical devices. So far, for the example, ear device, dental crowns and bone plates, skull plates, spinal plating system, facial implants, surgical instruments, and Invisalign braces. So these are the certain devices that have been cleared through this 510K pathway. So as ma'am mentioned, for 3D printing, 3D bioprinting, that is CBR, the Center for Biologics Evaluation Research, we can see that has not yet approved or cleared any products under 3D bioprinting. So we can also see that there are no guidances related to 3D printing under FDA submissions, or when compared to European Union market as well. So so far they have not yet approved even a single device under 3D bioprinting. And coming to the Center for Drugs Evaluation Research, there's only one approved, that is Spreatum in July 2015 under 505(b)(2) pathway. This 505 is completely different from 510K. 510K is exclusively for the medical devices, and 505 is exclusively for the drugs. And now coming to the quality assurance in 3D printing. So why quality plays a major role in any of the medical device companies? The customization of 3D printing devices again leads to a new complication for the manufacturers, because where the design controls are required by FDA for manufacturing of medical devices. One particular example where I can tell is that suppose if you are manufacturing a ventilator, your design control still remains the same, because it's sole device that's being distributed all over the world. So the design controls be fixed right from your initiation till the deployment of your device. But when coming to the customization, it would be patient specific, and hence design control will vary from patient to patient, and it is difficult to claim your quality assurance certificate and the regulatory clearance approval from the FDA. So it's still a challenge in FDA to get your device approved when it is 3D printed. And the other major problem would be like identifying the potential device flaws and verification and validation of the design performance. As I said, why this is again a difficulty is that due to the patient specific, design controls will be different, and the specification and the measurement of parts or the flaws of a patient would be completely different. Hence, coming with a generalized design control will definitely be difficult for 3D printed medical devices. And And these controls, these design controls are required at all stages in the development of the device. So by establishing the robust design control system, the manufacturers has to have set up a structure for identifying potential loss, verification, validation. One example for this would be a repeated review of the design. However, the build process and customization used in 3D printing present challenges in meeting the quality assurance requirements. And coming to the validation part of your medical 3D printed medical device, one challenge inherent is making patient match devices with all the steps in conversion of the image file as performed every time device is created, but then specifications of each device are unique. So in other words, what I can put is that critical attributes for the specific device and the efficacy criteria of final device must be validated as part of the software workflow in order to ensure the performance of the finished device for that particular patient. So this is a major challenge to meet the quality assurance. And what are the first challenges that are continued in regulation of 3D printed medical device? So as in I already mentioned, so traditionally manufactured medical devices are one size fit all, but with a product that is customizable, there can be issues with testing every single device that is made. So it's very much difficult, like, testing is again another big part of design controls. And then comes the verification and validation. If testing goes wrong, then definitely it's very much difficult to validate your design. And then when you're manufacturing something for a specific person, that is different than how regulations are completely set up, where they're looking at the end of the device. As I already quoted that the design controls must be separately submitted for the FDA for each unique device that you have been 3D printed. And now the main thing is that challenge is that regulations will need to pay attention to those differences between people, whereas right now those regulations pay attention to the similarities rather than the differences. For the the present guidances that they have released is that they are seeing for the similarities than the differences. But certainly, as in when the 3D bioprinting booms in, I think maybe within 4 or 5 years, we might see the exact guidances for the custom-made specific medical devices. And now, yeah, everybody knows about the COVID situation. So I just wanted to know, I wanted to tell you that these are the 3D printing applications for the COVID-19 that have been approved under Class 1 devices of EU MDR and as well as FDA submissions. So for the 3 medical devices that have been printed so far is ventilator walls, mask connectors for CPAP and BiPAP, emergency respiration device, and non-invasive PEEP mask. And coming to the testing devices, nasopharyngeal swabs have been printed using 3D printer. And for the training and visualization aids, they have come up with the medical mannequins to study the patients in further more detailed fashion. And they have also developed the biomodels in order to make the new testing devices for COVID-19. And then now coming to the PPE, everybody would be aware of this, but personal protective equipment. So face shields, respirators, metal respirator filters have been printed using 3D printer. And for the personal accessories like face mask, mask fitters, mask adjusters, door openers. For mask adjusters, one example I could give is that one school student who had printed in order to fix your mask properly so that it won't move from here and there, and it avoids opening mask every now and then. And the last application is the isolation wards that have been 3D printing within less than 24 hours. So all these application examples have been taken from Nature article with respect to US and Europe. And so all the, like, since 4 days we have seen more about additive manufacturing, more about 3D printing in medicine. And so today we also saw 3D bioprinting. So let's see the SWOT analysis for 3D printing industry. The strength would be all vital organs can be printed by single 3D bioprinter, easy to build own custom machine, easy to make body parts with desired shape and size, huge market potential, provide several entrepreneurial opportunities. So coming to the weakness of 3D printing, the quality of organs is printed. That is why the quality assurance plays a major role. Even then you provide all the details, but still FDA is not in a position to provide the approval process for certain companies, and it obviously it takes more production time would be more compared to the other devices, and technology is still in the premature state as mentioned by ma'am, and obviously the custom made devices are still expensive. And coming to the opportunities, improving machine possibilities, larger models, faster printing, multicolor prints, active dependent of biocompatible materials, customization of designs based on the customer needs. And the threats for this 3D printing in medicine would be technology background of the user, time taken for printing an organ, cost of organ printing, if goes in a wrong hands may have to contribute to the fake identity, increase in crime and illegal activities. This is one of the major threat for regulatory authorities in order to in order to even to generate the guidance document. They're still thinking whether to release the guidance documents or to see every test device is being tested properly with inculcating all good clinical practices. And yes, printing the future. The future of medicine certainly contains 3D printers, whether medical professionals are using them to help student practice and research new treatments and procedures, or patients are receiving new organs and prosthetics. And 3D printing has hundreds of possible applications. Down the lane, over 10 years, I think everything would be 3D printed. Even I think, as I mentioned, we have already seen the isolation ward. Maybe we can see not even the general wards or the ICU wards may be 3D printed, but not sure. And the conclusion, the advent of 3D printing represents an excellent example of how technological advancement can potentially change the surgical practice. And the future is bright for the further adaptation of patient-matched implant technology in many different areas of the body. And the regulatory bodies have begun gearing up to regulate 3D printed devices. The 3D printing is considered a change in manufacturing process to a more innovative approach. And then the quality control procedures will involve the input and research of multidisciplinary experts in the field to ensure delivery of high quality and safe models. These are some of the references. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer it.
Yeah, if any questions are there, we'll be able to take it.
Teams provide all PPTs. So I'll this one question from Prakasham sir is that we should use a specific organ for preparing bio ink. So there is nothing like you should use a specific organ for bio ink. See, suppose you want to develop a organoid from heart. You want to build a heart tissue artificially. So in such cases, it is easier if you take the heart tissue and develop your ECM, extracellular matrix, decellularized extracellular matrix, as a biopolymer. But say you don't want to use decellular extracellular matrix, you can use other biopolymers also. The criteria depends on what are the stem cells that you are going to use, what is the type of cells that you are going to introduce along with the biopolymers. So it is still currently it's not like you have to take, say you want to develop a heart and lung together, right? But you want to 3D print a heart tissue and you want to 3D print a lung tissue, but you want to use only one bio ink, one biopolymer. That is also feasible. Only thing is, you will, when you are using the cells, you will change the conditions over there. So once it is 3D printed, you have to put them into a reactor system. You have to put it in for incubation. You have to keep them separately and provide the media and the nutrients so that the tissues will grow and develop. So at that time, you will have to use certain differentiating factors. But these are all well established factors which is known for differentiation. What if you add what will happen, what the cells will differentiate into. So you add those components and that will help in designing or increasing your cell growth so that you get your artificial organ. I know both the lectures is a little bit off the sessions that we've been having so far. But
Yeah.
we found that it was important to include it because this is the emerging area of 3D printing. A whole niche area which is currently a lot of work is being done on selecting the bioinks or selecting the materials for medical applications. So if any more questions, using madam, is bioprinting used in exosome therapy? So currently bioprinting has not been used in exosome therapy. The reason behind that is not that it cannot be used, but because of the regulatory constraints. So there are a lot of companies who are fighting it with that, but currently it is not available. It is applicable, but just because of the regulatory issues, it is not still into commercial aspects. We'll conclude. Yes, sir. I understand it's a little bit offbeat, so we will definitely share our presentation, my presentation and Manjushri's presentation. We will share it so that it can it will be useful for you for the quiz. But sir, the test will be simple, so I think it's not going to be difficult for all of you to answer that. That shouldn't be a problem. If any more questions are there, we can. I will be. We could answer them, or we can end the session.
Yeah, I know that like many of them are not aware of what design controls is exactly. So I don't think I'll have any more questions.
What about stem
Participants.
cells? Sir, we use stem cells only. When we say bioink, it typically implies that the living cells that you are using are the stem cells. The stem cells are used because they're undifferentiated and they have the ability to differentiate. So it is whenever you say but you said heart cells as ink. No sir, there's a okay, you the cells that you can use is basically bioink implies you can use a biopolymer with cells and other components that are needed for the cells to grow. So if you use stem cells, then you can when once you have bioprinted the component and you put it into the incubator, the bioreactor for growth, you can manipulate the differentiation. But if you say it depends again on the application. So I suppose you want to print a 3D print a heart, it is advisable to use the heart cells instead of using the stem cells because the inherent architecture might be lost. So that is the reason why we prefer to use stem cells. So I hope Prakash sir, your doubt is cleared. Yes, sir. When we may use heart cells with the biopolymer, you can print a full heart. You can print the organoid. The organoid is like the skeletal of the heart. And then from this, you can grow it in the bioreactor to print a heart. I don't use 3D printer in my lab. I prepare the bioinks for use in the 3D printer. And as Srikant sir in the first session we had for the FDP has mentioned, we have a Propel lab on 3D printing. So that is where we do that. It's we have it in our college, BMSCE. I'm working on FDM 3D printing. How do you start, or can I have guide from you to do research? Sure, sir. You can email to me. Yeah, I have. My email and contact address are there in the brochure. You can email to me, and we can definitely discuss on that. So definitely. Typically, we use FDM printing for bioprinting currently, but I mean there are a number. It's actually a reiterative process, and it is not one specific process for all. Which companies or organizations are into medical 3D print?
One lab that works for medical 3D printing is in Electronic City, that is Next Big Lab, that's been sponsored by BIRAC.
Yeah.
One of the students from Vellore, VIT Vellore, has set up this company. They were the first in India to produce a 3D bioprinter.
Yes, and in addition, you have also a few companies. In fact, the afternoon session is with somebody who works on a related aspect. They work on bioprinting, but they also do medical 3D printing. How to test bio-based applications. So I haven't gone in detail because that would be too much of biology for because most of the participants are from mechanical. You have a series of tests when you prepare the bio ink. Just preparing the bio ink and allowing it and entering it, using it for the 3D printer is not sufficient. You have to do the cytocompatibility tests. You have to do the diffusion tests. You have to also see whether the adherence tests are there. So there are a whole array of tests that is done once you have the bio ink, and then you see whether it should not give cross reactivity. So that is what becomes the criteria over there. Yes, it's not only reacting with blood, it can react with any other tissue and bring about a cross reactivity. So since it will be an external part, when it enters into the body, it brings about an immunological reaction. So that has to be reduced. So there is a whole series of tests of biocompatibility which have to be done once you have your bio ink. And once it satisfies all these conditions, that is when it goes into the bioprinter. And even after printing it, before you put it into the reactor, again you have an array of tests that is done. So that is why this is not something which is not enhancing at a very rapid rate, because there are a number of hurdles to be crossed in this case.
Yeah, add on to that would be, as ma'am mentioned, there are certain tests. All these tests are prescribed as per the standard ISO 10993 Part 1 2018 that deals with the biological evaluation of medical devices. They're
Yeah, that
exclusively
is
for
for
the
medical
evaluation
device.
and yeah. No, and no, ma'am, certain drugs will also fall under. Again, there are certain parts until 11 parts. The drugs is also part of it. And the evaluation and testing within the risk management process has to also be followed according to 10993. Any other questions?
So oh, sorry. How can we use it? Can we modify FDM printer into bioprinter? Yes, sir, we can do the modification. How can we use it in exosome therapy? Mahesh sir, could you elaborate on the question? I wasn't able to clearly understand how you can use it on exosome therapy. As I had told earlier, currently you cannot use it because of the regulatory constraints that are involved. But if you want to know the protocols or the research work that is being done on that, then I can definitely share it with you offline. Sure, sir, you can contact me anytime. You have my number. It's there in the WhatsApp group and the brochure. I'm Saisha, right? So you can contact me anytime. So if there are any more, no more questions, then yeah, we can. Okay.
Yeah, I would initially thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to talk on this, and I thank all the participants for listening so patiently. Though I agree that it is out of the topic, but it is very much essential to know the quality affairs and the regulatory affairs and quality assurance that is associated with the devices. Developing a device would be like as when like I know that developing a device is difficult, but then coming to regulatory and quality, it is much more difficult. So that is why I had to choose this to at least enlighten all of you that these are the certain standards that has to be followed for 3D printed medical devices. And at last, yes, thank you all.
Oh, thank you, Manjushri. And thank you, Dr. Shaisha. I think we have covered all the questions which have been asked by the participants, and good throw on bioink, and how difficult it is to get a medical product out with all these regulatory pictures coming in. So that was something nice, because it was something off the thing for because our topic was basically on 3D printing. So that was a good throw, and hope I think some of the participants were convinced in this way. Thanks a lot, Manjushri and Dr. Shaisha. I think we
Thank you,
can
ma'am.
conclude for this session, and we'll meet in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. Thank you all.